the richest agricultural and pastoral areas of Queensland. I could never understand why, even in that day, they didn't put circles around the key areas, say these are for agriculture and the rest may be available for mining, and then also that gives more assurance to the mining companies. So I presume you've seen those maps, and I think they're still extremely relevant to what you're planning to do.
No, exactly right. The mapping process that we're proposing will protect the prime agricultural land as well as these types of areas that are being protected for other reasons, not just the agricultural land. It's about the settlement patterns and the lifestyle and the amenity of the area. But when you come to the question of protecting the big areas further west of prime agricultural land, they will be mapped as well. So the mapping process will do both things and protect both areas for different reasons, but for the same reason, to ensure that the values that we recognise are protected.
And okay, my main question also is going to concern coal seam gas and the problem of the great salt load that is in the water, and it appears to me at the moment that the coal seam gas companies still don't know what to do with the vast quantities of salt, whether it's sodium bicarbonate or sodium chloride. And so I'm wondering to what extent, if you're elected, you'll try and put the brakes on some of the coal seam gas development, and especially across the Cecil Plains, where you've got a magnificent broadacre farming, levelled land, and it is quite wrong, I believe, to wreck that with coal seam gas pipes every 2 kilometres or whatever it has to be.
Well, the mapping process will protect that according to what is appropriate in that area. Now, the issue of the salt is a totally different issue, but it's a very relevant issue, and it is unquestionably the responsibility of the company to find a solution to that. And unless they can find a solution that satisfies us, then they won't proceed.
What do you define as a solution?
Well, it's not up to us to define as the solution. It is up to them to find the solution. And until they can find a solution, what I would be requiring, what we would be requiring as a solution, is something that doesn't impact on the environment, doesn't spoil the land, and doesn't create a problem for other people, doesn't create a problem for the rest of the community.
But as government, in a democracy, you are responsible, not the companies, you're responsible for what happens.
To make sure that those things don't happen, that's right. To make sure the environment's protected, make sure the community's protected, make sure other people are protected.
So if all of your promises made today, when you get into government, you find that, the state of finances is such a mess that lies left you, it's the poison chalice.
We know it's a mess.
Will you agree to both resign from Parliament if these promises are not carried out?
I tell you what, in 3 years, if we're there for 3 years and I haven't got a statutory land use map covering this area, absolutely.
Yeah, we just want to establish
absolutely.
what's true and what's not.
Yeah. Okay, absolutely. Look, there's no question. I'll come back here in 3 years. I'll come back here before the next election, and because I'm committed to getting this strategic planning process in place. It should have been done years ago. It would have saved a lot of people, a lot of heartache, me included.
Well, Iris has done a tremendous job of morning tea here. So we might just take 2 more questions. I've got Snow and then Bill, and then if you guys have got time, just take a cup of tea. So I'll go with Snow.
Very briefly, as I was driving over from Gary, I listened to the ABC News, top story in the ABC News driving over. I don't know if you listened to it, but Anna Bligh was at West End School, and she's made the promise that she's going to devote half the royalties from the coal seam gas to a super education fund, which will be a fund where people either go into education or will be a personal bursary for every person to provide them with university funding. So which is basically a cynical attempt to sell coal seam gas industry to the broader community, which is politics, and that's fair enough. How much pressure is Campbell Newman going to come under to try and marginalise the objectives because they're getting in the way of the greater social good?
Yeah, well, I haven't heard that this morning, but there's no doubt the coal seam gas issue has been a very difficult one because it's been mishandled. It's been mishandled badly because the planning hasn't been in place, because the safeguards haven't been identified, because it's been an unseemly rush to develop it. So the whole industry has got a lot of catching up to do, a lot of bad reputation to overcome, and in the broader community. But we have to get the basis in place. We've got to get this planning done so that people can have the confidence. We've got to address the issues one at a time. There's no question that for a lot of people it will be a concern for a long time to come.
Okay, last question, Bill.
Okay, Jeff, you've outlined quite a nice program there for future situations. There's one thing that seems to be missing in the whole lot. Outside the Downs area, there's also significant quantities of grazing land that's in very favourable rainfall areas. Are you going to be able to turn around and do something about preserving those areas, because they can be either grazing or cultivation periodically? It will depend on how the mapping process goes, and that's not a cop-out, because I don't want to sit down and draw the map for every district. It will be up to the local people in those communities to have a big input, and they have to have. You know, groups such as yours, the local government, anyone who's an interest needs to have a big input into that. But we are focusing on the priority areas, and you know, the Downs is a priority area. The scenic rim, Campbell Newman identified it the week before last as another priority area. Areas in central Queensland, we are focusing on them. And the issue that you raise has been raised with me many times in my own electorate, because you know I represent places like Wandoan, where there was some beautiful grazing country bought up by Xstrata. Now, break your heart. But what we do about it and what we can do about it in the future is in that list of problems that we have to address.
Well, I hope, Jeff, when you do it, that you don't spend 10 months drawing out the mapping and then only give us 2 weeks to respond.
No, I can assure you.
Because that's often happens.
I assure you that won't happen. Good.
And you need to have some sensible people on your working group to put this stuff together.
Yeah, but there's no question, there can be no question about this inner Downs area. It is going to be mapped to exclude coal mining, irrespective of what input we get from anybody. That's the commitment that we've given over 4 years, and this is the way we're going to keep it, just the way we said we would.
But I thought that was the last question, but we'll just have Bob and then we'll have a cup of tea.
Yes, I'd like to thank Jeff and Ray for coming along this morning. I think the whole group has liked what we've heard, but I'd challenge you to go to Campbell Newman, to go to Ambre, as Campbell Newman did, and tell him the same story as you've told us today. So you know what they're talking about.
I told Ambre Energy this morning what I was going to come in here to talk about.
Good.
Great. Tea's on.
Good on you. Good on you.
Would you like to come through?